Here's the one chart that you need for Bitcoin to make the most of this Bitcoin bull market. We'll be talking about the various phases, in particular, the parabolic phase of the cycle that we're currently in, comparing it with previous cycles, and also understanding how long they can last, as well as the very sub phases that we see within this parabolic phase of the cycle. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive right into it. So historically speaking, we tend to see cycles last approximately 500 days to either side of the halving. So the bull market peak occurs some 500 days after the halving, and the bear market bottom occurs some 500 days before the halving. And this has been the case across time for multiple cycles now. And it's a phenomenal mirror principle that we have here, a mirror image caused by the halving, that we simply top 500 days after the halving and bottom 500 days before the halving. So that has been the case across cycles 2016, 2020, and 2024. But when it comes to historically breaking old all-time highs, that tends to be a very valuable trigger in terms of kickstarting the parabolic phase in a cycle. So that's this green phase, and of course the orange phase represents the current moment that we are in the cycle right now. So we're only just beginning, by standards of history, this parabolic phase of the cycle, because we're literally at that same point in time whereby Bitcoin broke to new all-time highs after breaking this major resistance and then embarking on parabolic price appreciation. Same thing in 2020 when we broke that old all-time high resistance and then rallied into new all-time highs and price discovery. We're right now in this very same moment, and we've only just begun the parabolic phase of the cycle right over here. So this green phase is going to be we do have a lot of time, and there's a lot of upside still yet to enjoy, simply because we're only just at the beginning of this phase. We're only just kickstarting it. And so to better understand these phases in particular, because when we're talking about 500 days after the halving, that's when the bull market peaks essentially. Historically, the parabolic phase of the cycle tends to last some 250 days to maybe even longer than that, 335 days. And that's been the case in the previous cycle. So if we're talking about 300 days, roughly speaking, if we try to average that out, get some sort of midpoint between 335 days parabolic upside phase in 2021 versus 250 days parabolic upside in 2017, then we can come up with a rough estimate that some 300 days or so could be expected, just approximately speaking. So we're only just beginning the very first few handful of days in that 300-day period, because after all, we saw a 200-day reaccumulation phase, which saw price meander and consolidate around old all-time highs for a long time. 200 days, and then we broke out. So we've really cut into those overall 500 days or so. And so that now means we have a remaining, it could be 300 days, it could be a little bit longer than that as well, because it also depends where could we peak in terms of how many days after the halving in particular. And so if we look at, for example, 2024 and compare that with 2020, they're very similar in the fact that 517 days before the halving is where we bear market bottomed, and then we saw 550 days after the halving see a bull market top. And so if we have that same sort of cycle, then we'll see the same thing happen: 518 days bear market bottom before the halving, and then 550 days after the halving is where we get a bull market peak. And so if we saw a 200-day, 205-day reaccumulation period, we've only just broken out and begun the parabolic phase in the cycle. And assuming that we still have 550 days after the halving, just like we spoke about just a moment ago. So that's just a rough calculation that we can just subtract from 550, 205 days. And so that leaves us with just over 300 days, a little bit over that. So it does give us a bit more of a cushion, gets us a little bit closer to 2021 figures. And so that's really important to keep in mind, because that gives us a little bit of a roadmap in terms of what to expect. So if you're thinking about, for example, 2021, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monthly candles before we see a pullback, and then we see 1, 2, 3 months worth of pulling back in that retrace, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 in that final price discovery uptrend. So it just goes to show that we only have a few months, several months in fact, of upside, and then we finally peak in that bull market. And of course, it's always better to just focus on time, but you can also focus on the monthly candles themselves. And in terms of what happens within these monthly candles, this is also going to be a really important and useful chart for you going forward to better understand what sort of price action to exactly expect in price discovery. We tend to see phases within the parabolic phase of the cycle. So essentially, located within this parabolic phase of the cycle of approximately 300 days, maybe 250 days at worst, at best 350, 30 days, within this parabolic upside phase of the cycle, we tend to see these sort of subwaves. And so if we're talking about, for example, this cycle here, we saw one parabolic price discovery uptrend, the first price discovery correction, then the second price discovery uptrend, then that second price discovery correction. And this doesn't look all that deep at all when we're comparing with this 80% pullback. This was actually a 25% pullback, and that's still probably going to be one of the more very worst versions of a pullback in this cycle. So it's important not to ignore it. So this is a third price discovery uptrend. So we get overall 3 price discovery uptrends and 2 price discovery corrections in this cycle, and here we get 1 price discovery uptrend, 1 price discovery correction, 1 price discovery uptrend, that's the second one, second price discovery correction, and then that third final price discovery uptrend with a little bit of a dip in the meantime. So essentially 3 price discovery uptrends and 2 price discovery corrections, just like what we saw in 2013. And here we saw 1 price discovery uptrend, 1 price discovery correction, second price discovery uptrend, second price discovery correction, and then that third and final price discovery uptrend. So just like we saw in this cycle, and in this cycle, we saw 3 price discovery uptrends and 2 price discovery corrections, which give us this sort of roadmap for that first price discovery uptrend to take place. We're only just beginning it in a few weeks time. Still a few weeks down the line, we'll see a multi-week price discovery correction. So whenever we see a dip right now in the market, please don't ask me if this is the beginning of the price discovery correction, because we're still in this multi-week price discovery uptrend, and it's still weeks away that we'll see this price discovery correction, which will in of itself last a few weeks. And then afterwards, once we recover from that marvelous dollar cost averaging buy side opportunity in the entire market on this price discovery correction, we'll see that second price discovery uptrend really take us to new all-time highs and beyond, and then we see that second price discovery correction, and then finally that third price discovery uptrend to finish up the cycle. So just to give you an idea, we tend to see multiple weeks of upside initially, and then a few weeks of downside in price discovery, and then again multiple weeks of upside, and then multiple weeks of downside, and then multiple weeks of upside. So it's just really important to understand that these phases take time, and it's several weeks at a time, and we have essentially 5 phases, 3 price discovery uptrends and 2 price discovery corrections, and we have to essentially divide 300 days or so and divide that by 5, and that's going to give you a very rough estimation of roughly how long each of these phases lasts. And of course, it's not exactly that they're equal, but just gives you an idea that, well, it's going to take several weeks for each of these phases to play out. So if price is dipping 5.5% right now just after breaking out, then you know that if this phase is lasting only a few days, maybe a week or 2, then you know that's a little bit too soon to be talking about the end of this price discovery uptrend, because we still have a few more weeks left, and the price discovery correction is still a little bit ahead. And so just this final chart to give you an idea as to what to expect in terms of bull market length. And this is a very, very simple chart where you see that 518 or 550 days after the halving gets us to mid-September, mid-October, and we always see these sort of phases in the cycle, whereby we have the pre-halving rally, the pre-halving retrace, reaccumulation, and post-halving parabolic upside. And we've seen all of these phases play out, just like we've seen them play out in the previous halvings, essentially. And now we get to enjoy this phase here. But as we've been talking about in this video, this parabolic upside phase is a broad one, and perhaps this is a little bit too general of a chart, which is why I break down the parabolic upside phase into 5 price discovery phases, and that's going to be that next sort of topic of mine that I'm going to be sharing with you in the next few weeks here on YouTube, but also in the Direct Capital newsletter. So if you want to stay abreast of level-headed insights and the sort of guidance that can be really actionable and can actually really make a big difference to your portfolio and also your lifestyle and even ultimately your financial freedom and dreams, feel free to subscribe and click in the link to the description in the Direct Capital newsletter to sign up there. But that's about it for today's video. Like this video if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this in the future. I'm Direct Capital and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.